Welcome to Get Freight to It. I'm Chris Arredondo, co-founder here at Cargo Chief and host of Get Freight to It, where we give you faster, smarter, quality capacity to help take your freight to zero touch. In our podcast, Get Freight to It, we cover unique topics going on in the world of freight with industry experts, from best practices, tips, tricks, new products, and whatever else impacts this industry. You name it, we'll talk about it. In this episode, I had the chance to speak with Chris Woods, VP of Operations at Sims Global Solutions, on the true opportunity cost of posting freight. He talks about how winning freight faster with tangible capacity can help break the load board cycle of chaos and the unknown of who's on the other end of a call. With our phones being the oldest piece of tech, leveraging vetted carrier data and a tighter TMS integration, Chris talks about how technology is helping him take care relationships to the next level. A question most sales reps ask: why is my load not covered yet? So ask yourself, how many loads are still sitting on your board uncovered? Listen in as we get free to it. Chris, thanks for joining me, man. Tell the audience who you are, a little bit of your background.
No problem, Chris. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. Chris Woods here with Sims Global Solutions, Vice President of Operations. Been with the company 5 glorious years and looking forward to the next 5.
Yeah, and so we've known each other, I don't know, probably 2-3 years, maybe 3 years, I think. And we met, I think, officially like not even a year ago. So right. We met at the Thai Summit, but you recently went to Manifest, right. A big show there in Vegas. Did you win anything or?
No, they kept all my money.
All right, there we go. That's how I like it. That's how I like it.
But anybody that went there, the 6,000 plus people that went there, all won in terms of learning more and more in the freight industry and supply chain.
Yeah, there are a lot. I saw I think Samantha Jones and what's the other guy's name? The Freight Pod. There were a couple podcasts I saw that were going on over there. Really good topics. I listened to a handful of what I could so far. What was, I don't know, what were some big takeaways for you?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, once you walk into that Manifest floor, it's pretty overwhelming with all the vendors that are there. And, there's so many moving parts going on with the people there visiting. And so it really took a day to kind of absorb the amount of things there to look at. But, after you kind of get your bearings and after you kind of start focusing on what pertains to you, right, you start to see kind of focus on your industry and your takeaways. And, some of the things of that is carrier relations was one of the biggest things that I talked to a lot of people about. There was a lot of final mile. There's a lot of cross-border partnerships that we were able to engage with that we're able to take home and utilize in our tech stack. And then also, obviously, integrations and AI, data analytics, and what that's doing to our industry and how that is creating efficiencies in our workflows. And then obviously what we'll probably talk about here is the investment in technology and what's that doing to also enhance the industry and also enhance the internal ecosystem of our carrier base.
So I saw an article, I think it was fleet logging. There were like 81 load boards out there. And I think there's probably a lot more when you think of like private boards, like all of the big brokers have private boards. There's other applications that create private boards for carriers and brokers also. But what would you say, like, is this like the end of load boards? Is there, like, back to your AI comment, is there AI replacing a lot of things like the load board, the marketplace, or is it like, how do you see, I guess, to rephrase, what era is this? Is it the end of load boards, or where are we?
Man, Chris, I don't know if we'll ever be at the complete end of load boards. I mean, load boards are a necessary tool in our tech stack, right? But I think there are some ways that we can avoid the unknown, and those load boards sometimes create the unknown of who you're dealing with on the other end. And so that's kind of a conduit for the fraudulent activity that we've seen in the past, 3 years that has really been on the rise. But I don't really feel like it's the end of load boards, but I just feel like there are some better ways that logistics companies like ourselves at Sims Global can enhance our tech stack by using AI, by also leveraging, companies like C4 and what you guys bring to the table.
Yeah. I think I talk with a lot of people about this, and they talk about like people that they hired, the last like 3 to 4 years. I actually caught up with a gentleman named Scott, who I worked alongside at C.H. Robinson. So this is back in like 2013. And he was just telling me how the load boards, or not load boards, but just how freight in general, booking freight has changed from the early 90s to today, where he was like talking about they didn't even have computers on their desk. And I can't really even imagine booking freight without a computer. I mean, or any job really. And like how people have become too reliant on load boards. And you mentioned the carrier relationships part of this. Like how would you think of a way to like use a load board, or I mean to bolster your carrier relationships? Like is that a place for a load board, or is that more for like an introduction to a carrier, then to like do whatever processes and strategies and other technology to overlap on top of that? I don't even know if that was a good question or not, but we'll find out.
No, I think I understand where you're going with that. But one of the things I think at Sims, what we're focusing on is that carrier relationships, and the way that we kind of bring those into the platform is utilizing tech, right? A lot of times we utilize load boards to find new carriers in different markets that we're not unfamiliar with. But the more and more you're familiar with your freight, the more and more you get familiar with your carrier base and your relationships. At the end of the day, people want to do business with people, and not somebody you don't know, and not somebody you're not familiar with. And so with that, the more connections you're able to make with carriers, I think the better off all of these logistics companies are going to be in the future.
Yeah. How do you think, so you guys you probably classify like mid-size brokerage, I think. And like, when there's, I mean, you talk a lot about tech, and there's like a lot of small brokers who are, mom and pop, they're probably just going to be okay with that 200, 300 loads a month. And that's totally fine. But at some point, like if they want to scale, I mean, there's a big difference between somebody, a big broker like Robinson or XPO or Arrive, like all the large brokers. Like how do you compete in that? Would you say Robinson is your competition or no?
I've been asked that question several times throughout the years, and I almost feel like you are your biggest competition, right? I mean, Robinson, JB Hunt, the Echoes of the world, those guys have a real foothold on a lot of carrier base and a lot of data. As a smaller or medium-sized broker, kind of like ourselves, as we start to kind of become that analytic tool to really look at our data, look at our carrier base, and start to really match up and utilizing AI to do that. I feel like the smaller brokers can really compete in investing in some real entry-level tech, right? That can start to bubble up some of those carriers that fit their needs.
Yeah, I think I want to say it was at the Broker Carrier Summit. I think it was this last one here in Fort Worth, where I asked like 5 or so carriers when they talk to their brokers, like whatever size it was, they mentioned names, and we're not going to get into that part, but I asked them, like, does anyone ever pause and ask you, what could I have helped you as a broker, like to their carrier? What could I have done the last 2 weeks to help you, like help improve your experience? Because I know when I was booking freight, carriers would call in and they're like, Chris, why? Like I told you to give me a call every time you get that load. Why was it on the load board? And it creates that void in the relationships where even today, as we're walking customers through this automation and augmentation process, the carriers that we talk to, I haven't talked to one that hasn't pushed back. They're all like, even this one guy was like, he was just like learning the product. I mean, it's just like a click of a button for a carrier, but they're like, thank you guys for everything that you're doing. Like, this is awesome. I want more loads sent to me. And it feels good as a carrier to know that like my broker partner is sending me more freight first before it gets to a load board. So I guess like, what are things, I mean, how do you take the relationship to the next level? Like from just like posting a load out there, how do you like use the load board or even use like what we have, or just even a relationship? Like, how do you take that to the next level?
I think it becomes a somewhat of combination between humans and automation, right? I mean, you have a lot of things from a human standpoint. You know, you have your voice, you have your personality,
Yeah.
you have that phone
Information.
you can
Yeah,
pick
yeah.
up. But there's those times where things get to be so busy that they do end up on a load board. There's a lot of automations that throw loads up on load boards. But one of the things that, you know, we here at Sims, we're starting to build our own private load board that our carriers are you know, personal carriers are invited to. Not anybody can see those. And so as we start to build those synergies between these carriers and between the lanes that they desire, we want them to be first right of refusal to those lanes and get notifications and be able to go onto that load board, bid that load, and then automatically receive that tender without even talking to anybody.
Do you ever think of like, so when loads get posted and like it's not no hash at a board because it's the product does what it does. It's just a marketplace sometimes that we're in, and whether that's like the 5 minutes right now that a load's about to get posted or it's next week, like there's a lot of times people just do it because it's easy, I guess, or I mean, because building a relationship is fucking hard. That's not, I mean, you like you can't just call a carrier and like just shoot the shit if you don't have freight for them. Like, I mean, you can try to build out like sort of a Rolodex or a spreadsheet or whatever, but like how, I don't know, how do you, like, when loads don't get covered still? Like, I could ask you right now and say, like, how many loads do you have on the board for next week? And you could probably come up with like, hey, or maybe the rest of the week, right? You probably say like, yeah, we've got like 300 loads on the board still. Sure. But you know somebody's gonna, like, you already know who's gonna take that load. Sure. It's just sitting there though. But like, and how do you like it's hard to ask this question because I'm like, how do you know that when your freight isn't getting covered? Like, at what point when you see it sitting on the board that you know which carrier is going to get it inevitably? Like, at what point do you say, like, why is it on the board? Like, why is it not getting covered? Like, how do you, as like an ops manager, like look at that? And then how does the floor react? Like, is it, do you say like, hey, we need to do this, and then like bad habits fall back into place? Or I don't know. It's just sort of an open question there, I guess.
It's funny you say that. We've had sales reps have that same reaction, right? Where, my load's open. Why isn't it covered? There's a lot of things, that fall into that, of why the load may not be covered. There may be some type of an economic situation going on, storms, whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, I think there's so many different areas that we can start to leverage data to assign those loads without hitting load boards. And there may be sometimes that those carriers aren't even available for the loads that we have in mind, and so that's why some of that load will be sitting on that load board for more than it should be, right? So. But what we like to do is I want to leverage, like Cargo Chief. They have a lot of carrier data that is able to bring down desirable lanes, historical lanes for carriers and then one of the newest, well, I don't know if it's a new feature to me, in Cargo Chief is the level of security of those carriers. You have low, high, and medium, I think it is, in terms of selecting the carriers that are already pre-vetted or being able to book on your freight without going through a huge risk assessment. So I think when you start to really monitor your open loads, right, you want to leverage, first of all, your vetted carriers that are already in your ecosystem, and then also start to leverage some of the tools like Cargo Chief that are bubbling up the carriers that may not be in your portfolio already, and then inviting those carriers, having those conversations. But to your point, you're right. It's very difficult to call up a carrier without a load in hand and have that conversation of, hey, who are you? What do you want? And let me go out and see if I got it on my board, right? So very difficult conversation. It's almost chicken or the egg thing, right? Do I need a load first or do I need a carrier first?
Yeah, that's man, when I talk to people, I think I even was talking about this with Scott. He was at Robinson and then he moved on to Trailer Bridge. And like the old days, and this is how I had always approached sales, was capacity first. Then I would go present it to my customer or shipper. But like it's also hard when you're like, small, mid, large cradle to grave split model, whatever it is, it's like, I think the big thing that always gets in the way is time. And like, you can't, like, the time it takes to go find, let's just say 10 carriers that maybe run a lane. Let's say you're Kansas City, and like you find 10 carriers that run Kansas City outbound to East Coast. And now you go research shippers that are in either side. And then like going to your shipper, I think with tangible capacity and options is going to like help you not just like grow and get freight on the board, but also avoid these pitfalls of fraud, any, scammers on load boards and all that stuff. Cause I usually ask people, like, somebody told me one time, 99% of our problems came from load board carriers. And it's like, well, when I talk to people about fraud, I mentioned like, where did it originate from? Like, why? And then why was it even there?
Right.
Like, and it's hard to, I think it's just difficult for people to, when they haven't seen the, like, a hustling way or the hustle of like capacity first to sell it. Like, there's a lot of customers that we have that sell that as like a commodity, and then they go and win business that way rather than just like taking on freight the inverse way. Right. So it's like preventing those headaches of cargo claims and all that stuff. But what would you say is like a good, I don't know, a good approach to growing? Like, is it capacity first? Is it like freight first? Or how do you guys handle RFPs, mini bids? Like, is that process totally different?
No, I love that you're bringing this up, because right now, when you look at the difference between spot freight and contracted freight, right? Two total dynamics of kind of doing your business, both necessary. Both of them are equally treated the same, right? But when it comes to sourcing that capacity and presenting your customer with a tangible service, it's two totally different options. So from a contract perspective, I want to be able to take a fleet, right, to a customer. If I get an RFP and I've got 2,000 lanes, and let's say I pick 20 of those lanes that I truly want, and I truly know that I can service at a high level, I want to be able to have maybe one carrier, two carriers, maybe 5 carriers for those 20 lanes that I can rely on, that I know that, hey, this is my best foot forward, that I can go after it. On the flip side of that, from a spot perspective, you're always seeing these different spot lanes come down the pipeline. With all the data that is out there, no different than Cargo Chief and some other platforms that are bringing in carrier historicals right now, there shouldn't be any problem in terms of seeing what's going on in the marketplace from a spot perspective. Instead of going to those load boards and trying to find a carrier that you've never done business with, you've never talked to them, there's so much data out there right now that you can say, hey, instead of posting my load, I'm going to just dig just a little bit, maybe spend about 5 minutes and find that right carrier base to fit that spot market. And then maybe even turn that around into a contracted lane.
Yeah, that's a good point. Cause you could post, let's just say LA to Phoenix. I'm going to assume that's a hot lane, and you'll probably get like 20 calls.
Oh, sure.
It could take, I mean, that may be like a minute or two a call, but you have no idea who's on the other line. And if you're like trying to, like, after you maybe talk about details, or even like, hey, what's your MC number? Yes, that load's still available. Or I'm just quoting it. What's your MC? They go and find that they can't work with them. And it's like that was a minute maybe to field, but it's also the other 19 in queue that is an opportunity cost of, like, had I had a more fruitful option or more quality option ahead of time that I could go back to my customer with, then like you may have a better option, more leverage, I think. And I feel like too many people too often, and I saw this in my own office before. I was challenged to, we were posting like 99% of our freight, I think. It was like, I was trying to like, definitely not flip it, not 99 not posting, but we got it down to like less than half. I think it was like 40% or so, to where like we already knew the carriers that were going to get that freight. We didn't have to post it. We would only push out like the loads that we didn't like already have carriers for. Now, like these days, like, what we do, we automate that whole process. But like even just winning business, you can't, a carrier may tell you, dude, I've had this happen so many fucking times in my life where the guy was like, oh yeah, I can do it for 700. I go to the shipper. I'm like, oh yeah, 850 or whatever. And then they're like, yeah, send it over. I call the carrier back. He's like, oh no, we took another load.
Yep.
All right. Well, fucking right back at the I just lost time. It cost me to have that interaction, because I think one thing people don't think about is how much it costs you when you have that conversation and it doesn't work out and you get the load, because you could be upside down all of a sudden.
Sure.
Like that's even, not just like the invalid options, but also you mentioned earlier the spot quote that comes in. I'm gonna ask you, the last, let's say, because we haven't really peeled back the layers on this yet with you guys, but if you were to think of the last 30 days, do you guys track the quotes and bids that you didn't win?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. So we are starting to monitor that. One of the things that we're leveraging right now is our partnership with HubSpot, utilizing real-time data and all of our quotes that come through the pipeline. We're monitoring if we're winning, or obviously if we're winning, they're turning into transactions. But in the past, we really haven't monitored that lost rate and what percentages of margin are we losing at. And so one of the things that we're doing today is monitoring those losses and going back and trying to analyze, okay, was it a capacity issue? Was it a margin issue? Was it a service issue? Why did this client not select Sims Global?
Yeah, that's because I ask, because like there's very, very often, it sounds like this was in the past, that you would get a quote and whether are you guys split model? I can't remember. Is it split model, cradle to grave, or
we're a split model? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So is it do y'all have like sales reps and then account managers and then carrier reps, or what's the
we have that exact ecosystem. Okay. That's one of the things we want to try to leverage, is that account management role in nurturing and growing that relationship with those clients.
Yeah. So that AM, usually when a load comes through and they quote, at least in my time and people that I talk to, it would be like, hey, so what do you think we can run this for? Or it's just look at a rate plus or minus because the sun is shining, and then go and shoot it back to the shipper. And if they didn't win it, it was out of sight, out of mind, and they never revisited that lane. Like you and I know that a shipper doesn't just open and close to ship one load.
Right.
Like that's going somewhere. Somebody got that business somewhere. And like there was even I had a team that they shipped like, man, I can't even, it might have been like Menominee Falls, Wisconsin. I don't even know if I'm even saying it right, but it was like marble that they would, I think it was unfinished stone or marble that they would ship to like other places, and they were like bidding on it. So like they would ask us, what's the cost of transportation? And let's just say $3,000, and they would, add the cost onto the whatever the product would be, and then they would bid on that project in that lane. And like I feel like people just don't. I mean, I want to hear more about that HubSpot connection in a second, but I feel like there's not enough people that like take those lanes and like try to like realize how much volume there could have been to that. Because if you, let's say like today, you just threw it up on a board just to try to get some eyes on it, and a carrier told you 3,500, you don't even know that carrier. So how do you even know if that's a good rate? You go and tell the shipper that, yeah, it's 35 or 37. Tomorrow, maybe they're still bidding on it. And tomorrow you have a better list of carriers to go to and find that 5 to 10 carriers that now all of a sudden, like you can go back to your shipper or your customer and say, hey, I like coming back on this quote, I actually have, or even if it's a week later or a month later, whatever it is. And like, hey, I revisited this because we haven't heard from you if we won or lost. Like I have a range of carriers, 5 to 10, that can run this from like $3,000 to 32. Is there like, can you rebid on this project? So now you're like, when you think of, if you're going back to your shipper and customer and like found some more cost savings, they might be able to win that business for their company. And now they just made money. You made money. The carrier made money. Now it's like what Greg at Concept says, a win-win-win.
Right.
And that's like, I feel like there's too many gaps in that where people don't look like it's just out of sight, out of mind. They quote it and it's just gone. And it's hard as like an ops manager or just a business owner to even like, unless you see those tracked somewhere, what's your win-loss ratio? Like, why did we lose half of those? Was it just like was there no response back from the customer? Or was like your feedback that you were too high? And like, if you're too high, then shit, well, they're shipping that with somebody. Like, let's go try to win it. And like, I don't know, how do you like take me to HubSpot? Is that like part of y'all, like how you plan on like looking at that? I don't know, maybe we can pull that stuff into C4 at some point. That'd be pretty cool to where it could just make an action for you. But how do you see that the breadcrumbs there to grow?
Well, first of all, you hit the nail on the head. A lot of customers, they don't respond. They blast these email offers out to so many different carriers and brokers, and they either pick by the first one who responds, which I promise you it will be Sims Global Solutions, 5 minutes to respond. But they also are rate shopping. They always pick that lowest rate. That's a challenge when it comes to the value of what companies like ourselves are trying to offer these clients. Sometimes we're not the cheapest guy on the block, right? And so one of the things that you leverage is that relationship and the communications and the tracking and all of the ancillary benefits that come along with our services. That's another thing I would say when it comes to that small to medium sized broker, you've got to be able to set yourself apart. But I think to answer your question, how we're leveraging that data is bringing that back into HubSpot and looking at, what carrier base could we have went to right off the bat to be able to offer that load, to be able to have that confidence in that rate, right? Maybe it wasn't 3,500, maybe it was 3,300 that would have won it. Understanding your market, understanding your lanes, understanding your regions, and being able to bid in confidence is what every broker wants, right? But the only way that we're able to do that is with, a lot of different partnerships in tech and that AI that everybody's talking about, being able to, have that carrier partnership in your tech stack to know that they're gonna have you covered. Because like you said, you can post that lane up and said some guy just calls up, heck yeah, I'll take that for 3,500. You have no clue. It's hard to put stock in that, right? He's not, you don't know if he's gonna be there. There may be a guy that calls him up and says, yeah, I'll give you 36 for the same damn lane. So you never know what you're competing with in the marketplace. It's all in real time action. But again, how you leverage your data and how you leverage your connections with carriers and the different tech stack that you have is how you're going to win in this industry right now. It's not like you said in the old days, man. I used to walk over to a fax machine and send carrier packets and rate confirmations. And so one load would take you close to 30 damn minutes.
Yeah.
So what we're living in right now, it is a new era of tech. It is a new era of load boards. It is a new era of just leveraging data right now to get business done. And anybody who is not investing, they're going to be behind.
Yeah. It's that, man, dude. Like I remember, like I was blessed, I guess, if you want to call it that, to handle the compliance at one time, and I was like the only one who had the ops credentials to be able to like approve or add or anything. Right. I'm like, man, I know we had carriers already that could have ran this load, and like I'm spending my whole time just like reaching out to the carrier, their references, and like physical paper, walking over there. Jack Johnson would love that. It was very great. Good for the trees, but it was like, man, and it was like taking 30 minutes easy. And if it's every load, and I talked about this with Danielle at my carrier portal about this too, that's like 30 minutes every load. I mean, and it could be like 5-10 minutes maybe if you don't check references and whatever, but now you're just like, dude, in that time the load's gone, the truck's gone, like there's nothing to like hold that relationship. So that's always something that's been, man, if I had a brokerage, I would not have paper. Like, It's crazy because I don't even have paper on my desk right now. Like I just do everything on Google Docs. Like when I was booking freight, I had spreadsheets, sticky notes everywhere. And like, there's gotta be a better way to book freight. And there is. And so I think one of the overlooked things though is that CRM and a plug for HubSpot because we use HubSpot too. But like it is a great CRM and like how you can like leverage different tools to come up with different ideas and like what we're talking about with projects or procurement and automated outreach and things like that, that I think it's going to help you win more business. And if you're not doing it, then why not? Like what's holding you back?
Right.
I guess, Chris, I ask you as we sort of wrap up here, we talked about load boards and things, and I like, yeah, AI is a big conversation. I think I saw a post from somebody about at Manifest that like AI was like the buzz, like everybody's talking about AI. I think 5 years ago it was data, and then now it's AI. But like, it's going to be interesting to see where it goes. Do you think? I guess two questions for you. One, do you think traditional load boards, like as we have it, as we know it today, do you think that's going to survive digital transformation, or does there have to be some AI shift or data or and the other question is probably goes on to this, like what would you want to see happen?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to load boards, I do think that it has to shift, right? There's been so much change in the last 3 years of how we do business and how we see business, right? And so, one of the things that I hope that load boards does in the near future, one is partner with the FMCSA, right? There's a lot of that fraudulent activity that comes through load boards, and that is the unknown of who we're talking to, and so being able to maybe even see the MCS 150 changes right off the bat inside of those postings, inside the carriers that you're working with. But when you're working with a phone system, when we talk about all the different tech that's in our world right now, the phone system is probably the oldest thing in our entire tech stack. I mean, right now, you pick up a handheld device and you don't really understand who's on the other end. But there's a lot of companies like Wirebee that's just come out of having that pre-identification before you answer those phone calls, which is a really cool tech that we've been testing out and utilizing when we start to utilize those load boards. But yes, to answer your question, there's got to be a shift in the mindset of how load boards are bringing in carriers. When do the responsibility of load boards fall on that fraudulent activity, and what are they doing to monitor that? And I hope that they can somehow utilize AI. You can also see that offshore call coming in, right, and be able to cut that off or be able to route that in some other different direction. But at the end of the day, the way that we are vetting our carriers, the way that we are sourcing our carriers, I do feel, and the way that we're investing in our own load boards, right, in our own ecosystems, I do feel like that there is a technological shift, whether it be today, tomorrow, next month, maybe a couple years down the line, you start to see, load boards not be the number one sourcing carrier solutions.
Do you, last thing here, we've looked at carriers because we understand that product adoption isn't just on the broker, the user, it's also for the carrier. And like what we've seen, and I mentioned this earlier, that there's been zero pushback from carriers, even carriers that we were, brought up to us that said, hey, this is a not very tech forward carrier. And carriers most often they don't have a TMS, and it's like they're still whiteboards. I remember talking to somebody a couple of years ago, 50 trucks, whiteboard in Excel. Like, I guess, I mean, if that's what works, but like the other side is that carrier that we talked to, and I was really surprised because I think there's carriers that are like 15 trucks plus, 10 trucks plus that usually have a dispatcher of some sort, or they're by a computer. They're not going to be like on their phone, and they, it suit the bill or fit the bill that they were like, yeah, let's do this because I like it's easier. You're saying I don't have to wait for a load to come over. Like I don't have to wait for them to call me. It can just come over. That's right. And so there was another carrier that one truck, and they were like, "This is awesome." Like that beat my expectations because I had the impression that these one truck ponies are just going to want the call and the email, but like you said, the phone is the oldest thing in our tech stack. I don't think I've ever really even thought about that, but We could say chisel and slate or paper and pen, but
the oldest device in our tech stack.
With the cord and all, in there. Yeah. I called you the other day or last week or whatever. I was like, I didn't even know you would have a desk phone, but you did. So there we go. But that's crazy. What do you think? Do you think carrier adoption is gonna, I don't know, I guess to put it forward, is that gonna be like something that's gonna be a hurdle for if things are gonna need to evolve, or do you see carriers like on board for whatever else comes out?
I think carriers are equally as frustrated with the fraudulent activity in the industry as brokers are, right? And then it trickles on down to clients. And so, as you start to, use load boards as a source of income and a source of feeding yourselves and a source of feeding your family and a source of bringing in profits to your trucking company, if that shifts, right, they're going to shift with you. It's adapt or die type of situation. And so I don't think that trucking companies are going to be hesitant to adapt to new technology. I think as we evolve in our industry and as we start to become younger and younger, right, the average age of truck drivers have been in that 55 to 65 range for years. And as we start to see that hopefully start to shift down as generational gaps start to tighten, I think you'll start to see more adoption to tech and more adoption to personalized load boards to different brokers. I mean, CH and JB Hunt have their own load boards as it is today. So as medium-sized brokers like myself and other peers of my own, I think you're going to start to see those load boards be very, very vibrant in bringing on carriers and have that activity happen. It starts with the trust factor, right? And once a carrier trusts you, I think they'll shift their mindset and how they do business with you, whether it be a phone or an email or a different load board.
Yeah. Chris, it's been a pleasure, man. Any last sort of tidbit you want to end with? What would you recommend people do these days?
I would recommend, taking a look at your tech stack, right? I mean, your tech stack is kind of the wave of the future. And how are you communicating with your carriers? How are you sourcing your carriers? How are you vetting your carriers, right? Understand who you're working with and even where they're at. I've in our tech stack in my carrier portal, I know exactly what state they reside in when they fill out that carrier packet. And so I can cut the source off if I don't like that it's coming over from Indonesia or something of that nature. So invest in your tech stack, because at the end of the day, it's going to save you time and money and sourcing of fraudulent activity and trying to mitigate those losses that you'll come up against.
Awesome. Chris, it's been a pleasure, sir.
Man, it's been a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, awesome.